Okay, I'm really excited because today is a very special episode. And for those of you who have been part of the Little Ohm family for a long time, many of you over the years have asked about this relationship and have asked me specifically about my own relationship to my mother. And so in honor of Mother's Day, I invited my mom, Cathy, darling Muir, say hi, Mom.
Hi.
Onto the podcast so that we could talk about the complicated, beautiful, challenging, life-altering, AWE, capital sum relationship of mothers and daughters, and how it changes and sort of everything involved with the mother-daughter dynamic. So welcome, Mom.
Thank you. And thank you for asking me to speak with you on this near Mother's Day, because I think it's really cool.
Oh, I do too. And it's a year, so the podcast will be a year old on my birthday, which is in a few weeks. Yeah. And so it feels like, of course, I didn't think about it last year. And there's nothing I'd rather do than sort of dig into the truth about how we heal from difficult relationships. And if any of you have read my book, I wrote a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit about our relationship in the book. And the thing that I just want to start off by honoring is that your openness and willingness to be truthful, I really respect, because I know that it's not easy. I'll speak for myself to tell some of the darkness of my own history. And so I'm just really like honoring you for being truthful and honest and stepping forward towards the light. So thank you for doing that.
And I want to thank you for joining me there for your journey of trying what we were just talking about earlier today, of just these kind of profound perspective changes that come as you grow. And it's so complicated. It's just, and so emotional that it can't be done in a day or a week or a year. It needs 10, 20 years to untangle itself, and for each other to see different perspectives than what we thought was going on at a certain time, or motivations, or whatever was going on at that time. And I think that just to bring in mental health for a moment, ancestrally, there's a very long line of mental health in my side of the family. And that shadows all the times that you get that you can be honest and open because of shame, because of hiding, the fact that there was depression and a little agoraphobia, and a lot of this thrown in, a lot of that thrown in. And so you're ashamed of that part, and the shame kind of puts up even yet another block to being honest with anyone about how we evolved.
Yeah. This became so apparent to me in the past year because in a lot of our groups, I don't really like to do this online or with online groups, just because it's very emotional and powerful. But in person, we've been doing some geneograms, and I shared with you some of this so that you could do some of your own too, because I kind of always share with you like the tools and techniques that I'm using and getting trained in, so that you can try them because you're so open to all of that. And the powerful, listen, here's the deal. I thought it was just us for a long time. I thought it was just me. I'm the only person who suffers. I'm the only one who's been through trauma. I sort of knew some stuff about yours, but I was too in my own immature brain and development and victim to even really acknowledge that. And I also think that when you see a parent as having gone through something, it's so painful, you really push it away because you're like, I don't want to deal with that. This person is supposed to be taking care of me and they've got something, right?
Yeah.
Which I know is not necessarily compassionate, but as a kiddo, this is kind of where you come from. So all these years of thinking like, I'm the only one and blah, blah, blah. And that was really like, you saw a lot of that anger that I had as a teenager and a young adult, verbally abusive, physically abusive to you, to myself. And the anger that I felt that people don't believe now, because I don't have a, you know, I'm anyway, it's just very different now. But this response to the loneliness, the isolation, because you feel like you're the only one. Now, fast forward to being in my 40s and leading these groups, and we gather as women and we do these lines, and everyone, every single person in the room has been affected by either physical abuse, sexual abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction, mental illness, depression, suicide, anxiety. Every single family somewhere in their veins. Holy crap, this is just what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And when you can see that in others and see yourself, it's like all of the sudden, and for me, it wasn't this year where I felt this way about our relationship and our history. It has been happening over many years, but all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, this beautiful, sensitive woman was doing the best she can, you know? And I can have sensitivity to that and compassion, and I can soften because you're human. I came through you like physically, but you're just a human with no guidebook either, right? And that commonality has been, I think, the biggest shift just on my side. I'd love for you to talk a little about your side, because one of the things I think is so important to us continue, like always working on healing our relationship and doing such a great job with it, especially the past few years, is that you do your own work. You do a lot of your work. So I'd love for you to talk about that process a little bit and sort of what insights you've had as you continue to do your own spiritual development work.
What I've most been intrigued with and never gave credit to was the lineage of my mother's mother and the awakening I had of what I thought was extreme abusive behavior towards us as grandkids. She just never, when she got mad at my mother, she got mad at us and took it out on us. And I realized that near the end of her life, she basically was certifiably out. She had Alzheimer's, and I did. You know, they didn't have a name for it then. They called it "you were old with dementia." But having worked with Alzheimer's residents now, I see that when she'd scream at us in the back seat of the car and just yell at all Michael or my brothers and sisters, and just go off on us on this complete rage. I saw that with the residents that I worked with. It was completely off the wall. It had nothing to do with anything really, but it felt like you had just been kicked in the gut. And so what I thought was just an evil lady who never was kind to us was really more of a product of, I believe, her upbringing, plus in her older years having a physical disease, having the disease of dementia. And being young like I was probably 7 or 8. I didn't know, you know, I had no explanation for it. And then watching that part of her in my mom, just this rage, just you never knew when it was going to go off. I realized that the DNA is actually, and I researched this. The DNA, the cells actually have the same, they have that same attributes passed down. It's not just environmental or nature or nurture. It's in your cells. It's in your DNA. And you're never going to know how much of it is just, could be DNA, but how much of it is, and it's inevitable. You're going to have some of it too. And then, of course, as it came down to me, I was afraid of being angry. Yeah. So I medicated my anger with anything, anything I could get my hands on, so that I could always be sweet. And as we all know, that doesn't work so well. I just never got mad. I just got sad.
Yeah.
I remember one time you took some sort of metal object, I think it might have been a pen, to Dave Landreth's desk. You just got this beautiful antique desk, and you took a pen to it. You didn't know you were drawing on it. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to replace this thing. It must be worth thousands of dollars. And all I could do was sit down and cry. I didn't get mad at you. I just sat down and cried, because I had no way of knowing how to get mad without mad becoming rage and then hurting and striking out. So all I did was take it all in, sit down and cry. And you, looking at me sitting there crying, were more affected than had I, screamed. And you kind of expect that from a person. So when I sat down and cried, the look on your face was like, oh my God, I really did screw up here. I'm really in trouble. But so it is, it's just how it's been passed down. And the work I've been doing is just trying to go back in my history and look at some of the instances, some of the stuff like we were talking about this morning, and looking at it from their perspective, or what was going on, because it didn't occur to me until lately that my grandmother was obviously suffering from Alzheimer's, early onset on Alzheimer's. And there was no medicine and there was no diagnosis. There was no help for that back then. So, because I do know that she later, in a couple of years when my mom was taking care of her, she was physically violent and didn't know who she was. She had all the classic signs of regular Alzheimer's. So it was really putting those pieces together to figure out who I am and why I'm the way I was and am.
Yeah, and that the full circle of working with Alzheimer's care the past few years, and then getting more information. I feel the same way. So I want to talk about sensitivity and superpower and addiction a little bit, just in terms of the archetypes, because one of the things that I'm obsessed with these days is not so much that the labels are trapping us, but more that they are actually these clues to how our operating system is. And that when we don't have the tools and the skills to process and digest our life, whether there's like actual trauma with a T or not, just sometimes being a human in the world is very traumatizing in so many different ways. And we're elevating this conversation now, I feel like, as we get the neuroscience and we investigate mental health more and more, that one of these commonalities with addiction is the sensitivity to relationship and this fear, just like what you were talking about, of these big feelings. And I think partly I'm interested because I have a lot of clients who, this is where we talk about anxiety and sensitivity and superpowers and how we tune into our intuition. I know that you are and always have been deeply spiritual, even in your toughest times. Like your connection to music and nature, and very simple things and service, right, is always like a thread in your life. And I also have a son. I actually have both of my kids are ridiculously in tune and sensitive. I would say Milo maybe more in terms of he doesn't see it as a superpower right now. He's very rejecting it. So it's kind of like I'm looking at the past and the history, and I'm also watching my own kiddo and trying not to tell myself stories about how he's going to be or what he's set up to be with his superpower. So can you talk a little bit about just your own sensitivities and how that has really been in your life as connection, and where the places where the sensitivities and the pain cause more pain rather than connection?
Well, I think that probably the most difficult time for me to deal with the big emotions was when you and I were pretty much not speaking for a while. And for me, that was the end of the world. That was the end of my world. And then somehow, I think, I don't know if it was through meditation or I believe it was just sitting still with myself and finding some space there that was peaceful. I realized that that wasn't the end of the world, and that there was a life outside of being Pleasance's mother. And even though you were my grandest gift to the world, you were not mine, and I wasn't you, and I could be free of that. And that was a real superpower type time, because I really did have to redefine who I was, as opposed to always being Pleasance's mom. And there were times where because all your friends, Pleasance's mom, that's who my identity was. I wasn't Cathy anymore. I was Pleasance's mom. And you had a lot of friends and a lot of people who really kind of cherished you in some ways, I guess. I idolized you. Erica for a while. Just a couple people. But so I heard it a lot, and I was very proud of that. And then you and I have talked about this since, that's something I have to consciously stay away from, is being proud of you when what you've done had nothing to do with me in any sense of the word, any of your accomplishment, some of the things you've done lately. It's not, it almost takes some of what you should be feeling away from you if I'm the one saying, I'm so proud of her, because, it makes it sound like I did the work or some of the work, when I was just sitting back doing nothing. I had nothing to do with it, and you were the one doing all of it. And I think it's easy to get caught up in that, and hard to separate, because this society is so competitive, and everybody wants their kid to be the best. And, I was watching a podcast this morning from Simrit, the lady that, and she was talking about how just everyone wants to be they want to be the best yoga teacher. They want to have the most radiant eyes. They want to have all this other silly stuff. And she said, it's just gotten so crazy that you don't even know what it is that you want to be proud of. And you're kind of afraid, like, I'm a vegetarian, but not that kind of it, I eat it. It's just, we got a whole new group of words and perspectives of what is something to be proud of. So that, I think, was the most challenging emotional time. And having gone through that, that very that dark side, was the catalyst for me to let go of being Pleasant's mom and finding my own sensibilities. I've since, and it didn't occur to me till about 3 months ago, when I started doing tarot cards and spending, and like I was retired basically, I had all morning to journal and play, and I realized that between you and your sister, I was utilizing a lot of the same tools, and I thought, isn't it interesting that they have such power? And then I had thought to myself, where did they get that? And it's like an anvil fell on my head. It's boom, you know, you're the one that gave birth to them. And if your belief is that this is encoded in our cells, then you're the tree that, you know, gave birth to these branches. So it was pretty amazing when I thought that, because I never wanted to take credit for you guys both being very empathic and very intuitive, very intuitive. So
I think it's so interesting that you say that too, because one of the other things that happened when I've done the geneograms and the pulling ancestral lines down a bunch of different times now, and every time it's a little bit different, and the threads that come through. But after probably I don't remember which ones, first or second or third time, I noticed, and so, like, I think that because maybe we're wired for negative, I mean, I think maybe this happens because we're wired for negativity, that we go right to the bad stuff. Like, here's the alcohol and here's okay, so great. So we got all that clear. Now, what are the other threats? What are the good things? What are the things that are so deeply ingrained into who you are? And the things that came up for us in our line were about service, helping people. I mean, you've dedicated your entire life to helping other people. As a hospice, at the Institute of Living, with mental health, in caregiving and nursing, in home, Alzheimer's. I mean, literally your entire life, right? Yeah. And I'm the same. Like, that will be the story of my life, is caregiving, healing, being part of groups. Like, that's just, we have that very much in common. And the other piece is so much that I got from you that I think my grandmother gets credit for, but it was actually you that really taught me about service and care for others with your hands and not just with your checkbook. Because my grandmother was awesome at fundraisers and gatherings and promoting the names of things and helping people. But I don't have any memories of like doing stuff with her for other people. But I have a lot of memories of us having nothing and being in helping other people. Like, we didn't have anything, and we would be volunteering at soup kitchens on Thanksgiving or nursing homes. Remember, we used to go to nursing homes and we didn't have anywhere to go for holidays, and it would just be the two of us, and we would take the bus, and it would take forever, and it would be cold, and I would be pissed because it was so cold. Why were you making me do this? And so what is so beautiful, and what I really am encouraging everybody who's listening to do, is to take the time over time to not only see the things that are painful, right? But we have to balance this out with the other part. And I think when you really dive in and lean into your healing, the other part arises, right? It's like almost naturally. Like, I'm sure now you can talk about some beautiful things about your mom.
Oh yeah.
You know, that you couldn't have done when you were in it and when you were struggling and so and still really shut off. And so I want to honor that. I don't think over the past 40 years, you've really gotten enough credit for the service, for the threads that are so active in my life now, spirit and service, to watching you. And so I just really thank you for that, and for just being yourself, because you taught me how to do that. And that helped me find my way, right? Being truly myself and connecting to the pieces of me that make me feel most alive and of of use and of service. And I'm saying this for me, but I believe this for anybody. If you find the pieces underneath all the crap that are truly who you are and you connect to them, your radiant joy, your energy, it's radiate. It's everywhere because you're living your dharma, your purpose.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Thank you. I think that I don't remember. Well, yeah, I guess in some ways I do remember my mom, like we lived on a farm, and if somebody didn't have food or their farm wasn't doing well, she would take, food. She would take eggs, fresh eggs. She would do some things. I don't remember her being completely selfless a lot because she just had so much on her plate. I mean,
yeah, a farm
there just wasn't a lot left to give. She was exhausted and she wasn't very healthy. But she treated us. I mean, when we didn't have a lot to eat, we each had our own cat and our own dog and our own pony. I mean, it was like that love of animals is one thing that I see through all of our family. And you never really were raised with animals. You had cats that you were allergic to.
Yeah.
But I see your love of animals now. And that you're sharing that with Sailor and Milo. Yeah. And that to me is just so cool because, especially for Milo, I think it will help him, and his love of nature and animals. Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure where you got that. I think it may have skipped down to you. Yeah.
Well, in different situations, I mean, and living arrangements, for me, like as a child, I was back and forth between you and Dad. I was at grandma's all the time. I mean, you were working a lot. You were working the night shift. Yeah. Like there were some things that were just not practical. And one of the things I realized recently about Mize with his sensitivities and stuff was like, we do have space for that. And I can make it a priority so he can feel that kind of love. And so it was like, it was there, even if I didn't necessarily have it. But again, it's kind of interesting to look at the dynamics of your family as you're creating them and honoring your ancestors and honoring your threads and lines that are intuitively there as a way to say, like, it's empowering, right? It's like, I know this and I know how to take care of him in this way because my mom grew up on a farm and she had lots of animals and, that was always a big deal to you. Can I ask you a little bit more about the period when you were redefining yourself and maybe some of the things that you had to do or that you moved towards, or what was that like?
When I first got sober, or?
Yeah, well, you said that like kind of when we had the difficult emotional time and then you had to sort of let go of this identity and create a new one. What was that process like? And maybe sobriety had to do with it.
It did. Yeah. I mean, that was because it was such a difficult thing to do and it took its toll. I did drink a lot more, because it was a painful fact that, I wasn't needed to be in that role.
Yeah.
And I think that led to using a lot more, which always will lead to some sort of brick wall. And this goes back to what you were saying. I think my first AA meeting, I thought, I'm here because I had such a bad childhood. And I'm the only one. And as, of course, I didn't talk because I was my first time, I just listened to the stories of, veterans and people who had humongous trials and struggles. And it kind of took about 2 meetings for me to realize that the entire room was full of, I had a really shitty childhood and that's why I drank. And so that kind of took away that defense right away. And that was hard. That was actually when I met Christine, who really got me hooked up spiritually. I think there's always a person who comes along at the right time. And when I first saw the word Dharma up on her calendar, she was going to a Dharma group. I didn't know what that word meant, but I thought that was one of the coolest words I'd ever heard. And I was afraid to ask because I didn't want to look dumb. But when she said, that is my spiritual beliefs and my path, it's my Dharma, it's what I'm here for. And I was like blown away. So over time then that began, and it was also the time I started doing yoga. And you and I you were a few years ahead of me, but it was very close to being at the same time. And that was one of our olive branches that we could hold out to one another and talk about. And from that and the meditation, it just took on a life of its own. I kind of just let back. And there are some benefits of AA and their format and their believing in someone higher than yourself, and not naming it and having to nail it down. And it doesn't, Christine likes to think that it gives you a kickstart down your path, because you've already accepted, you've got to surrender. You've already accepted there's somebody greater, a power greater than yourself. You have to accept certain things. And so that helped immensely. And then even as I kind of took the path of just having a set practice of yoga every single day and meditating, it's never been a day that I didn't get up and do some sort of practice. Well, there might have been a break here or there when I just said, screw this, it's not work. No, but
well, then you do take a day off and then you feel so crappy and you're like, well, what was different today? And it's like, I didn't do my practice.
Why can't I breathe? Why do I feel all so that is what helped completely redefine me, because it gave me a place to put what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was give to people, but I didn't know how to give to people, and I didn't know who. And you get caught up in this whole, do I want to help animals? Do I want to help people? Do I want, cure cancer? And so it allowed me to clarify what my priorities were, and try and do that, which was animals, as you know. And because my job let me help people, so I could kind of do both. But so that was pretty much how the path was developed. It kind of evolved out of just necessity of staying sober, and it was difficult because it was hard to see how that was going to release me from the pain of not having you. But as I stepped back and did it, it did release me from that pain. And I think it helped you to come closer to me. It made me more approachable. So if I backed up, you came forward. If I came forward, you backed up. So it was a difficult time, but where we are now, you're the only person I know that I can get on the phone with, and there's how's your weather, and then we go right to something juicy.
I don't have a lot of small talk.
We don't sit around and talk a lot about anything. We want to talk about hospice and dying people and it's and that's how it is with Christine, who's my spiritual sister. Nothing. We go straight for the good stuff, and that to me is all that really is worth spending a lot of time talking about. So, I mean, I want to hear about the kids, but that's not all I want to hear.
What's that identity piece like? I mean, so obviously Sailor's 11, so I've only had 11 years of experience of mothering a daughter who is very much her own person, period. We have a lot in common, which she doesn't necessarily think is a good idea right now. You know, she's kind of moving into the stage where she's like, I don't want to be Pleasance's daughter. Right? I don't like, and everyone said, you look the same. No, we don't, you know, and she's leading meditations. You have the same stuff in common. No, we don't, you know? And so what's your sort of wisdom for anyone who's listening, who's wrestling with the identity and their own daughter's identity? You know, you've obviously been through it.
It's so different for me in that I, at that age, wasn't really allowed to form my own for me, and in a very physical and oppressive way. Mm-hmm. You had the benefit of being held on a looser leash. You were
That's a nice way to put it.
You were pretty much.
Was there a leash?
Well,
you were free.
It reminds me, you were just, you had free reign of pretty much what you wanted to do, because you were trustworthy and you were your own inner, your own inner judge. Should I be doing this? Should I not? You know, you were insightful back then. And I see the same thing in Sailor. And you let her I think you're somewhere in between that, because I think you're more conscious of, and I think there are different pitfalls today than there were, you know, when you were young. There's a lot more with the internet and stuff. There's a lot more to be aware of and be frightened of. So I think you're kind of keeping a tighter rein, I won't say leash, is good. And there is no wisdom. It is, I think you and I and Sailor are blessed with a pretty good helping of insight into, we know what's right, what's wrong, and where the drawing the line in the sand is, you know, about how much we want to push it. And I think that is what's going to define how Sailor navigates these years. Is that she's already got it. She's just got to know she's got it and listen to that voice. She's got it.
Yeah.
Milo, I have no idea.
Yeah, we'll see. To be continued. Okay, I want to talk about writing a little bit, because before we start to wrap up, is that I don't know. Do you identify yourself as a writer? Do you tell people you're a writer?
I'm starting to more now, as I learn reading the artist way and all that. And listening, even to just the podcast I listened to this morning, of those voices, those stories we tell ourselves that you really can't write, you know, just because you have a pen and paper in your hand and you're writing, doesn't mean you can write. And listening to the voices of my mother saying, you know, that I couldn't sing. And I've been told all my life, you know, you have a crummy voice, you can't sing. And how I bought into that. I stopped trying to sing because I was embarrassed. And how you can't write, you can't. So I've taken away those voices and shortening those stories and trying to eliminate all preconceived notions of what I am or what I can do, and go back to the beginning when sitting in junior high, I used to write page after page after page of what was going on at home. And, you know, it wasn't a journal. It was just like a narrative.
Yeah.
And teachers coming and taking it away and then reading it and saying, oh my God, this is, you know, just really, really good writing. So I'm getting back to it. Slowly. I'm allowing myself to say that even if I'm not in the process of writing a book, I'm a writer.
Yeah,
because of how I see words and how I've always known that you see words as carrying our most, the most concentrated parts of ourselves go down on paper. You know, those words, we can say in one word something that it may take other people 20 words to say, but we can think it and write it. So it is something I'm definitely going to go back to trying, experimenting with.
Do you have fear about writing or sharing it?
I didn't when I was younger. I did as, and I didn't in college. And I don't know if it's fear that stops me. I don't know what what it is that's stopping me exactly. It's probably some fear, and I'm not sure why, because I talk and I don't talk as well as I write. So I know I convey my ideas better written than I do speaking them. And I like my choice of words better written than spoken. But I don't know what it is. It's something that I'll have to investigate.
Well, and one of the reasons I asked too is that I've been doing a lot of like going back through old stuff. And one of the things I found was when we probably like, I'm trying to remember when that retreat was in December with Mazen, when you came and sat. Was that like 4 years ago? 3 years ago? It was right before Little Elm closed. So it was 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, that's around. Yeah.
So before that, right? So probably 4 or 5 years ago, I had asked you as a way for us to sort of move back towards, like navigate how to kind of get over our shit and our past and move forward. But for both of us, I am not the type of person who can say, let's just pretend none of that happened and move forward. Like I can't just sweep it, and I'm not like, I am a forgive and forget, but we have to kind of do the work. Like we can't just forget. We can forgive, but we need to do it, and we need to be present with what happened. And so as a way to work towards that and towards each other, I had asked you, because I know that you're such a great writer and I love your writing, and that language and communication is much more difficult for us, always has been, to write the stories that you remember, and that I wanted it all in writing. And I found all those letters when I was just cleaning out the journals in my boxes a few weeks ago, and remembered, I forgot that was part of our healing process. Was I called you and said, like, I need to have some of these pieces. I know that it's not the whole story. It's not my dad's story. It's not going to be my grandma's story. It's not my story, but I need to hear your version of this stuff, because I don't know it, and I'm only living in mine, and mine is not good. So like, how do we get better? Is like, if you write to me what you think happened, I'm going to learn.
Right.
So do you remember that? Do you remember?
Oh my God. Yeah.
What was that process like for you?
It was extremely hard. It was very, very hard. And then I would do it on the bus, a lot of it on the bus, and then walk into work and find out somebody was dying or something. Yeah. It was, the time I did it in the day was not very small.
Yeah, not the bus, yeah.
But it was full of emotion. And then I would go into work and just completely lose it, which isn't good. So if I, continued to do it, if I wanted to pick up where I left off, I would do it in the evening, when it's quiet and calm. But It was very draining. It was very hard. It was very unpleasant. And a lot of it I had forgotten until I sat down and wrote something the time before, and then that led to the current, the next chapter. There was so much shame in a lot of the stuff I did when I was addicted, that so much of it was still filled with shame, and maybe getting it out and sharing it with you helped. You didn't judge me. You didn't, you knew there was going to be hard stuff to read. But it was definitely part of healing. I was glad you asked me to do it, because I'm kind of like one of those people that still sees the teacher stand and saying, this is what I expect of you, and this is when I expect it to be done. And so I'm better if I'm told to do it and when the deadline. So yeah. And I think we were doing it once a week or once a month, or
yeah, I think I said just do it when you feel like you can deal with it.
Yeah.
Like I was mindful that it was going to be hard. But I also didn't know how it would feel once you were actually sort of doing it. So I would just get these random, thick envelopes.
Yeah.
Well, I think also, I just have a dream that we write together. Like I have a dream that we find a way to share our own story in a way that really honors the different perspectives, because I think that's really needed in a lot of these sort of healing memoirs or people talking about spiritual journey. It's always only through one lens, and there's always another side to the story. And I just think that would be really beautiful. And so I'm just always asking you, when you're ready, I'm ready.
And being partly retired now there is more time. Yeah. There was just, working full time with the residents was just too draining. I mean, I would come home and literally fall like.
Oh yeah. So much. No, I know. And to do this work, you need the space and the time. It's very emotional. And I have been having challenges also with going back through those boxes, and then like the kids are up and then going to this life, because they feel separate. But what I know about spirituality and healing and practice is that they're not separate. That's just the ego and delusion creating this duality. So when I feel that way, I try to say, nope, this is the whole story, and then creating space to deal with the emotion as it comes up, because we have so many good tools. I can see my hammock from right where I'm sitting, and that is one of my best tools. So like having the tools to process and digest emotions, and learning Ayurveda has helped me so much with that layering of it. So,
right.
So I hope that we do that and we make that happen. Go ahead.
I think that my change to Kundalini yoga and where you are in Ayurveda is so perfect, because they are completely intertwined, whereas Hatha yoga really, I can see where it led to certain places, but it wasn't like it was part of the rest of it. I see more of a whole with the Kundalini and with Ayurveda, that I'm starting to think in my head in ways of, like, you were talking about fire the other day, and I go to work and I'm thinking, it's still cold here. I was still thinking I want something fiery. I mean, it's starting to, just by osmosis and just by the transfer of energies from what I'm doing in Kundalini, which is always, revving up that fire. And I was thinking, I got to ask my boss what kind of dog she is. She's going to laugh at me, but.
Would she know?
No.
Oh, no, she wouldn't know. You have to give her a quiz.
I know.
Or you just read it. Just have it in.
Really open to all of that. So she's like a sponge. Like first day I started, I gave her my big mindfulness yoga book that I learned from, because she asked me for a book, and so I was like,
That's so good.
Yeah, she's really willing to learn things. So what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you would like to say to close about anything we've talked about today, or anything you want to say to the community?
I just want, I hope that everyone through this talk can see some of themselves and some of their mother, and just see the whole picture. Back up and look at the whole picture and see both of you, both people, both families, both whatever, and notice if you can shift it just a little, turn it just a little, start seeing a perspective from just a slightly different angle. Mm-hmm. And if you keep doing that, those things that bother you and your mother makes you crazy about this, or, you know, your father, whoever, just keeps taking little baby step shifts, and eventually a lot of it will be easier to digest and to feel. And you know, it's not an I'm right and they're wrong situation. It's just a different way of looking at your mother-daughter relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I've learned that from you. So I thank you for that.
Thank you for coming on and chatting with me. Thank you for being courageous, and thank you for your spirit and guidance through the things that you were interested in, and helping me really form and shape that. I'm really, really appreciative of that path. And I'm just really proud of us, like both of us. I'm really proud of you. I'm proud of myself, and for the years and years and years of inquiry and curiosity that we've both done in order to live our lives and those relationships, because I think a lot of people close the door and they never open it again, and it's just too hard and too scary. And so I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I know it's hard and I know it's scary, and for some divine intervention that I don't know and you don't know, our souls and our path were able to open the door. And these years of study, I always say that I know that my yoga and meditation and spiritual practices have worked because I can fully see you and love you and have compassion and appreciate you. And that at the end of the day is the fruit of the practice, the quality of your relationships.
Yes.
And if you can feel that for the most challenging, difficult relationship in your past that you had, like, to me, it's just like, I don't even know what's left, what the next 40 years of my life will be. You know, like, I know from the evidence of our quality of our relationship that healing is possible.
Right.
For the darkest of relationships. And I think that's why, while both of us, I think, well, I'll speak for myself, while I was like, about having this conversation publicly, that I know it's for the greater good. I know it's for other people who struggle and who feel like they can't find their way home, you know, to their people.
And part of finding your way home is finding peace in relationships that you thought you could never, ever, ever love. Yeah. So.
And just like you said, it came because of that redefining. Like, you're finding who you truly are separate from me was the path to your wholeness, right?
Yeah.
And same for me, like being able to say, I can't actually, like, I have to cut in order to figure out who I am without this enmeshment with this person that I care for. And that's what I say actually is, like, when people hear, if I ever share that, like, we had a period where we were not talking at all, I said I did it because I love her, not because I don't love her.
Yeah.
Because it was too hard, you know, too sticky. And so the releasing so that you can be you and I get to be me is the healthiest thing for everybody, you know, and it was very, very, very painful for everybody. So I'm proud of us.
I am proud of us too. And this is the thing we can be proud of because we both did it.
Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. Happy Mother's Day to you, you beautiful mother.
Happy Mother's Day to everyone. We love you. And look for our book. We're going to write it. My fire. Here it comes.
Uh-oh.
Watch out, world. All right. Love you. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.